And you mentioned the diversity even in the livestock, and I think that that's one of the things that we, the classic trope that I've shared multiple times is, I keep the horses by the road for the tourists, and I keep the cows by the driveway for the neighbors, and I keep the sheep out back to pay for it all. Do you think that there's something more than just that economic resiliency of a diverse livestock system? Is there something that we're missing in the soil that when we don't have a diverse livestock system as well as a diverse crop rotation and plant community?
Yeah, absolutely. There is microbial shedding. Every species of livestock sheds billions and billions of microbes. They shed microbes through their saliva. They shed microbes off their hair coat. They shed microbes in their manure and urine. Every day, every step that they take, they're shedding microbes. And the microbiome that is on and in those animals is very consistent with the microbiome that's in the soil. So that creates a synergy. We call it microbial quorum sensing. That is something that no machine, no tractor, no combine, no sprayer can do. They cannot shed biology. And the other thing that it's not just that, though. So we get this microbial shedding that is critically important to contributing to the total microbiome on and in the soil, okay? And that cycle of function. But the other thing that's happening is that hoof action on the soil, okay? We got to think about this. How long has that been happening, okay? So the microbes in the soil, the plants themselves, and the livestock all have been doing this together, functioning together for a very long time. And everyone is sending a signal to the other. So the microbes and the plants recognize that hoof action of those animals and respond to that. When those animals are eating the plants, that plant immediately responds to that signal, and it starts to gather more photosynthesis from the sun and produces more root exudates to signal the microbes in the soil and to go grab more nutrients right away and feed that plant, because that plant is saying, I just was eaten on, so you need to go grab food for me to feed me so that I can heal from this grazing event. And it's that repetitive process that keeps everything thriving. And oh, by the way, it is also that repetitive process that pulls carbon out of the atmosphere and pumps carbon back into the soil. Okay. If you want the most efficient way of sequestering carbon known to man, okay, that is it. That is it. And that existed long before we ever started thinking about any of this.
I always use the analogy. We've all seen pictures and documentaries on the Great Plains and the large herds of bison roaming across them. Were they alone? Was it only bison? No, of course not. You had wolves and coyotes, and you had deer and elk and antelope and bears. And then there's the whole plethora of birds and insects. And we often get asked and realize we work with, I think, about every type of agriculture there is in North America. And many are straight cash grain farmers. That's all they have. And they ask us, can we go down the regenerative path? Well, yes, of course. We can advance your soils significantly, but make no mistake about it. They will not reach the level they could be if we integrated animals. That's just the plain truth. And that's what Alan was talking about there.
And I think that, I was called out recently for not having covered grazing corn stalks on the Working Cows podcast. And this probably still won't count because we're not dedicating a whole episode to it. But whenever I'm interviewed on somebody else's podcast, I always say that's the opportunity in American agriculture, and maybe other places too, is being that middleman between the livestock guy in the West and the crop guy in the East, especially in South Dakota, where you've got the river, and North Dakota, where you've got the river that separates the two halves of the state. Play the middleman between the livestock guy in the West and the crop guy in the East, and bring those cattle and at least incorporate them during the dormant season, if not even longer, if they were willing to do some kind of a crop rotation with some cover crops that those cows could graze in the growing season. So, I mean, there's opportunity there, and it's Greg Judy's no risk ranching, right? It's custom grazing on leased land, and it's a way for somebody to get started in a very easy way, and it fixes a lot of the issues. Like you said, we won't ever go as high as we could go as far as regenerative agriculture is concerned if we don't incorporate livestock onto these acres.
You're exactly right, but that's part of the beauty of it. By applying the 6 principles, 3 rules, you're actually going to significantly lower your cost of production. One of the most difficult things Alan and I and our consultants work with every day is that, farmers and ranchers by and large are very good at producing yield in pounds, but they're terrible business people. I actually worked with a very large client who, once doing the analysis, found their cost of production to run a cow each year was $1,794. Okay. Now, what I will tell you, they had an excess of 10,000 cows. Okay. So do the math there. Yeah. It just doesn't work. But think of if they would have put all those cows out on corn stalks for the winter instead of feeding processed feed. But this is where the peer pressure comes in. Well, we don't do it that way. We feed processed feed because that's the way father and grandfather did it, and we don't want the neighbors saying that we're hauling our cows away because we're lazy. I don't know, Clay, when it's 20 below, I'd much rather be sitting in the easy chair than out there starting tractors and equipment. Let those cows graze corn stalks.
Yep. Peer pressure is pressure to do something exerted by the neighbors, and tradition is peer pressure exerted to do something by people who might be in a graveyard. And so we worry a lot about what those people think, and probably might be better off if we did a little less worrying about what those people think, I think. We've in American agriculture, we've tried to fix this problem, and again, I think in trying to fix these problems, we've created new problems. But so now we've got a whole host of different ways to make money by making changes, and that's conservation payments, ecosystem service payments. But what are we really saying when we say this is the only way I'll make a change is if I'm going to get paid for it? Is that? Yeah. What are we saying when we say that?
If I may there, because this strikes home to some work Understanding Ag was doing. We cut a pretty wide swath. This past year, we were working with 458 farms and ranches in 46 different states in the United States, plus Canadian provinces, Mexico, England, Ireland, and we've been keeping track of data on projects we're doing. And now, although I'm going to preface this a little bit because I have many, many good friends at NRCS and at Extension, and there's good people that are really trying to do the right thing. But in saying that, oftentimes there's these programs that offer incentives to, for instance, plant a cover crop, to try no-till, to try strip-till, etc. And what happens, the farmer will gladly accept the payment and try those practices. But what's the retention rate of that? Well, typically, if you look, and I don't care whether you're talking NRCS, other government payments, whether you're talking, Ducks Unlimited, Audubon, and maybe I shouldn't name names. The list can go on here. When they do that, retention rates average between 8 and the very high end